it is terrific to see so many of you here this evening. I just wish that those people in the press who are saying that there is little interest in politics could see you tonight. For those of you who don't know me, which I suspect is most of you, I felt I ought to sort of establish some provenance. Basically, I didn't move fast enough when Chris started to organise this and said, Bob, would you chair it? And I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, I have just finished as a senior lecturer at King's College, but I was 10 years a deputy head in a fairly exciting school, not in this town. So it feels a bit like school assembly all over again. However, I am here to sort of facilitate this evening. I hope when we get to the questions, you will make your presence known so that you can give the questions that you've sent in ahead of time. There are 50 agendas around the room somewhere, so do share. You will see from that we are about to have a 5-minute presentation from each candidate. Then there will be formal questions from the floor, followed by a 2-minute summing up from each candidate. And then we are providing refreshments for the last part of the evening up until 10 o'clock. And I hope the candidates will feel able to stay and to give you a chance to talk informally to them about issues that are particular to you if you felt they weren't aired during our formal questioning. So without more ado, the candidates are here. In the order that they're going to speak, we drew lots just now, so it's all been very fairly done. In very good spirit, may I say, so far. I'm going to shut up now and hand over, first of all, to Poppy, who is going to speak to us on behalf of the Green Party. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, well, welcome to the first Hustings of Chipping Barnet. And the last one, of course, as well, so we better enjoy this one because it's the only one we're getting. I stand here as a woman with a number of dubious privileges. I belong to the only party here that won't take money from big corporations, in fact, any corporations. It means that we Greens are the poorest, so although we are the third largest in terms of members in the country, we don't have major party status. And so the polls have been underplaying us, so watch out. I think we might surprise you on the 8th of May. But not taking money from the corporations means that we Greens are not subject to the same pressures that business brings to bear on the other parties. Thus, I am the only candidate here who is going to put to you a perspective based on compassion and sane political economy. We subscribe to a vision of a country governed by a system that is designed to serve people and the planet. One that has an idea for the good life that does not involve exploiting others and destroying the natural systems that sustain us, but rather it envisages sharing the world's bounty fairly and designed to enable us to do so into the long term. The other parties here will tell you that the economy is recovering, and we need to keep it up. Prioritize cutting the deficit, stability, responsibility. Bring out your word bingo cards, because I promise you those words are going to come up a lot. Watch out. They are not what they seem. The whole market fundamentalist approach has been a big con. Government debt has doubled since the crisis, from 1,500 billion pounds. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman published a demolition of the whole austerity budget yesterday. I will read you one small quote. It says, "It is rare in the history of economic thought for debates to get resolved this decisively. The austerity ideology has collapsed. to the point where hardly anyone still believes it. Hardly anyone, that is, except the coalition that still rules Britain, most of the British media, and the Labour Party, that dedicated the very first page of its 2015 manifesto to a budget responsibility lock, there's that word, promising to cut the deficit every year. What we get is unprecedented economic crises, inequality, and suffering. I am sickened by the way the poor have been hammered and the richest have been getting richer and paying less tax. I am standing in this election to give myself a chance to signal to Westminster that if you want my vote, kick big business out of our politics, give us better jobs and a fairer society, scrap TTIP and strengthen the environment. I invite you to join me in that, because we all share the dubious privilege of living in a rock-solid Tory seat. Voting for the other parties says, hell, we love it how it is, keep it up, give us more of the discredited, heartless ideology of deficit cutting, let's have more economic crises. Any vote that isn't a green vote in this constituency is a wasted one. Don't waste your vote.
Thank you, Poppy. That set the standard for timing, ladies and gentlemen. So, can I hand straight over to Victor for the UKIP?
Hello, everybody. I am Victor Kaye. Who on earth am I? Because most of you have never heard of me before. Well, a very brief rundown. I graduated in economics, politics, and history. I worked in market research for a number of years. I became a lecturer. And then when I retired from that, I set up a small business, a travel agency. I am the grandson of immigrants, Russian-Jewish on one side and Anglo-Greek on the other. I'm an upholder of the Judeo-Christian values that are fundamental to this society and to its laws. But what about my party, UKIP, which is often painted as being somewhere on the extreme right-wing fringe, almost unacceptable? Well, let me tell you about UKIP. United Kingdom Independence Party. What does it stand for? Independence for the United Kingdom from rules by Brussels bureaucrats. United Kingdom means that we respect all four corners of this country. Today's Sun newspaper, some of you may have seen it, English edition that is, encourages people to vote Conservative. In the Sun's Scottish edition, it encourages people to vote for the SNP. Well, well, well. What happened to the Conservative and Unionist Party? No doubt we will hear shortly. I don't have truck with anything that is going to cause the Scots to dislike the English or the English to dislike the Scots. So what do we believe in? Well, above all, we believe in democracy. And our democratic system is croaking, groaning under the strains because times have changed. I look forward to elaborating on that if we get a question about it. But we do need changes to the House of Lords, we need changes to the procedures of the House of Commons to take into account votes by MPs from England for English legislation, only 2% of the total, very easy to do. We need changes in the local government structure and a return to to the committee structure in local government rather than the cabinet structure that we've been having for the last few years. There are far more things. We are also in UKIP an internationalist party. Yes, an internationalist party. We want trade and good relations with all countries of the world, not just Europe, but certainly including the Commonwealth and other countries in need. And we want to negotiate those relationships and trading agreements ourselves, that is to say the British government, rather than have it done for us by Brussels, which will not necessarily be in our interest. We are internationalist also because, yes, we welcome genuine refugees from around the world. And I'm sure you know that Nigel Farage has called upon the British government, had no answer yet, to take in a fair share of Christian and other religious minority refugees from Syria and Iraq. They have no other homes to go to. They're not welcome elsewhere in the Middle East, so let a fair share of them come here. We are also a party of enterprise, and we value in particular the dynamism of small and medium-sized businesses. I hope to elaborate on that later. We are a party of the welfare state, which we believe in strongly, and of the NHS, which should be fully funded and free at the point of requirement. We believe strongly in education, of course, and in furthering vocational training, apprenticeships, and a proper way of funding universities which does not give students a debt of 44,000 over the rest of their lives. We're a party that believes in strong defences for this country, but we're also a party which does not believe in entanglements in useless foreign wars. Thank you to Mr. Blair for Iraq, thank you to Mr. Cameron for Libya, and look what they've done. We would be very wary of getting Britain into anything like that again. We want to control our borders, and that means that we believe that the population of this country is rising too fast as a result of migration, with resulting effects on housing, education, and all the public services. I'm sure we'll get a question on that later.
And that is time.
Oh, sorry, one more point, please. On the economy, Poppy was right. Yes, everybody except the Green Party has accepted that, of course, the deficit and the debt are the agenda. When I studied economics, John Maynard Keynes was required reading. He taught that governments should spend their way out of recession. However, we will be fiscally responsible, and we have a programme, the only one here that's fully costed, and I look forward to talking about that afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Theresa.
Thank you. Can I start by saying what a great honour and a privilege it is to be standing here before you at this Hustings event this evening. The reason why I'm appealing for your support, the reason why I'm standing as a candidate in this election, is because I want to make this country a better place. And I want to champion the interests of everyone who lives in the Chipping Barnet constituency. Now, I believe that we need a Conservative majority government to secure the economic recovery and to continue to build the kind of country that we all want to live in, a country that lives within its means, a country where there's a job for everyone who wants one, a country that rewards work, that gives every child the best start in life, and a country which offers everyone security in their old age and security when they're ill and in need of the NHS. But I also am appealing for your support because I pledge to you that I will work all the hours I possibly can to be the most vigorous and strong voice for this constituency, because I am passionate about this place where we all live, and I am passionate about the issues that people here care about. I have spent 10 years championing those issues, and I swear to you I will continue to do so with every inch of my being and all my energy if you re-elect me on the 7th of May. And my priorities, many of you will know them, but my priorities are securing the best schools for Barnet, the best NHS services, the best transport and infrastructure, and of course to support our local economy, our local businesses, our local high streets, and protect our suburban environment. If I'm re-elected, I will continue that hyperactive round of engagements, and apologies to all of you who probably heard me make more speeches about various constituency events than you deserve to hear in a lifetime. But I have got results. Over the years, I've been carrying out those campaigns for your interests. I've been working for 8 years, 8 to 10 years to support our local high streets, and we've seen Barnet Market's future secured with brand new facilities. We've seen our historic spires just up the road saved from demolition. We've seen our post offices not just saved from the threats that they suffered under the Labour government, but actually with extended opening hours and increased investment. But there is much more to do to support our local high streets, not least of which is making sure that the big businesses competing with independent retailers on our high streets pay their fair share of taxes, and that's why David Cameron is determined to make them do that. And I will also keep up the pressure to make ensure Barnet is one of the safest places in the country to live in. I didn't earn any favours from Boris's Deputy Mayor for policing when I came out against the closure of Barnet Police Station. But what was the result? We have our police station still here, still open. And crime has fallen by 20% across this country. But there is still more to do, so I will always fight for the fairest share of resources, for policing resources, for this constituency. And I am a passionate supporter of the NHS. We've had a successful expansion of Barnet Hospital. I will continue to support the NHS free at the point of delivery, and a Conservative government will increase real terms funding on the NHS by £8 billion a year by 2020. And as Transport Minister, I was one of the people who ensured that we finally got that upgrade of the Northern Line, and I will continue to fight for better transport and also better broadband. I couldn't avoid that subject. 91% of this constituency is covered by fast broadband, but that's not a lot of comfort for the 9% that isn't. So that will continue to be a very high priority, because you cannot have economic success without the best infrastructure. And I will also continue to engage with all of the diversity of which we are so proud in this borough. I've been campaigning for justice for Cyprus for many years. My support for Israel and the Jewish community dates back even further. I'm fully engaged with the Tamil community, the Hindu community, the Muslim community, and I spoke out strongly when this borough suffered the disgraceful attack on the Islamic Cultural Centre a few years ago. So I will also, to wind up, will continue to be passionate about protecting our suburban environment. I will be a staunch defender of the Green Belt. Yes, we need new homes, but not on the Green Belt, and only where they wouldn't put unacceptable pressure on our infrastructure. I've stood shoulder to shoulder against proposals like Pinkham Way, against proposals like Cat Hill. I will continue to defend this constituency's environment. I will continue to work as hard as I possibly can to help all residents in the constituency and to do my very best to be the most effective MP possible for Chipping Barnet. Thank you.
Thank you, Theresa. Now, Marisha for the Lib Dems.
Thank you, Dr. Burstow, and thank you, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yes. Good evening. I'm Marisha Ray, Liberal Democrat candidate, and I'd like to speak about how the Liberal Democrats would bring about a stronger economy, a fairer society, and further opportunity for everyone. 3/4 of the Liberal Democrat Manifesto commitments from the last election in 2010 have actually been delivered. Our children are the future, and we're working for opportunity, more opportunity for every child. We will guarantee education funding from nursery to 19 and qualified teachers in every class. Prosperity for all is important to me. We will budget fairly and invest to build a high-skill and low-carbon economy. I say this because we as Liberal Democrats bring balance. Balance to protect the poor, balance to ensure that those who should pay their fair share actually do so. We are an important part of this country, and we have been for the last 5 years. There is much that you have not seen, but I know that you have the imagination and the intelligence to know what I'm talking about. We need to protect our climate and the environment. You know that. You can remember how the climate has changed from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, perhaps even before that. We will bring in 5 Acts of Parliament to protect our natural environment, to increase recycling and increase penalties on waste crimes, to reduce air pollution, so important here in London, and improve transport, to reduce Britain's greenhouse gas emissions, and to improve the insulation of our buildings. You know that we can deliver on the green agenda, because we have already almost trebled, the delivery of renewable energy, renewable electricity to this country. We will invest the money which NHS leaders say we need to give quality healthcare for all and guarantee equal care for mental health needs. I remind you that the Institute for Fiscal Studies said that we provided details in our manifesto, and when we have been talking about adequately funding the NHS, we have been doing so from the start. This is no last-minute pledge. This is something we have been planning all along. We work for a fair, free and open society. Come work with us. We know that you're already working for this. Vote Liberal Democrat to deliver that fair, free and open society which we are all working towards. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marisha. Now, Amy for the Labour Party.
I'm standing for you today as your Labour Party candidate and hopefully as your next Labour MP. But my background is not as a professional politician. I have a day job outside of politics, earning just over the minimum wage. Until recently, I was working on a 0 hours contract, and that was not because I get a kick out of the flexibility, I can assure you, Mr. Cameron. I got involved in politics because I'm concerned about the future of our country. I got involved because I believe that commitment to fairness, social justice, and greater equality should be at the heart of our government. I believe that we share a common humanity, and that the concept of solidarity is at the centre of our society. It should be at the centre of our public policies as well. Those are some of the reasons why I stood to become a local councillor here in Barnet. Apart from potholes and the insistent problems with capita, my caseload is full of people in housing crisis, suffering from recent welfare changes and benefit sanctions, people who work but can't afford to pay their bills, families who have the threat of eviction hanging over their heads on a daily basis. That is the reality of life here in Barnet and in Britain under the Conservatives. I held an advice surgery every fortnight on the Dollis Valley estate. I'm there in person listening first-hand to testimonies of people struggling to get by and trying to navigate an increasingly punitive welfare and housing system. A community group in Barnet told me that there has been a massive increase in the number of people coming to them for a free hot meal because they can no longer afford to eat after the Tories' welfare changes. So let's get one thing straight here. It was not Labour's public spending that caused the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. Those events were a global private sector financial crisis caused by greed and excess. As a good friend of mine put it, the banking crisis was not caused by one too many Sure Start centres in Bugle, but it's lifelines like Sure Start and the incomes of those already in the breadline that we made to pay the price. Nothing said it had to be this way. Labour's response to the crisis got the economy growing again for 4 consecutive quarters between 2009 and 10. When George Osborne took over, his austerity policies immediately terminated that growth and have delivered us Britain's weakest economic recovery for 100 years. And most people in the real world aren't feeling this recovery. Neither is it filtering through to our public services, our schools and hospitals. Recently I've met so many people in Barnet who've told me that 5 or so years ago they didn't think of themselves as particularly political, but the actions of this Tory-led government have forced them to speak out and to stand up for what they hold dear. People who've started petitions to defend our NHS, people who took to the streets last Saturday to march to keep our libraries open. People like me, ordinary people, are saying that the Tory plan is not good enough for Britain. We have better aspirations for our country. We want a government that will serve the common good, a government that will invest in education and improve the route into work, a government that will take concrete action to build 1 million more homes, including affordable homes, that's social rent, a government that recognises people not to be treated as commodities but deserve dignity and fair pay in work, a government that will bolster the rights and opportunities of disabled persons, a government that will put patients before profits in our NHS, a government that will properly invest in renewable energies and a sustainable future, a government that takes its responsibilities to our brothers and sisters abroad seriously. That is what a Labour government will do. That's what people like me got involved in politics to achieve. Now, it's a media myth that this is a safe Tory seat. In fact, it's recently been upgraded by a polling organisation to be a marginal seat. So you can waste your vote on the Greens, but you're not going to waste it on me. Well, the Tories... What the Tories don't want you to know is that since May last year, there is now a majority of Labour councillors in Chipping Barnet. So this May, you can make a difference. I believe that a Labour MP will best represent the people of this constituency. I urge you to put your faith in a change on May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, and completing this section of the evening, Mehdi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mehdi Akhavan. I'm an independent candidate of Chipping Barnet. I'm a shopkeeper in Friar Barnet. I'm very proud to be here among distinguished characters of different parties. I'm a self-made man. This is not the first time that I have a standing for to become Member of Parliament. This is the third time, twice in Iran. I came to UK 1977 as a journalist for one of the big publications in Iran. I was resident in Camden for 35 years, during which twice I stood as to become councillor, and I was elected by residents of Hampstead and West Hampstead as a member of Leaseholder Forum for 8 years. I served in Camden. I moved to Barnet. Since I have been in Barnet, I have received 3 civic awards from 3 mayors of Barnet for my outstanding contribution to the residents of Barnet. I'm a founder of Caspian Children and Adult Foundation. I help children in need. I help those disabled people in this country who are lacking many benefits. My profession has been journalist. I am an actor, film and theatre actor. I'm a director of theatre director, producer. I'm a poet. I have been photographer for 17 years, professional photographer. I have been in business 60 years, and I know what the businessmen or traders are suffering in this country, in my area. I can help them. But they told me I can speak 5 minutes here. Let me tell you, I have many ideas. If I am elected in my area, I will put those ideas in practice. And I will solve many problems in my area. homelessness, unemployment. I will have classes for people to come to my classes to teach them business, management of the business, and I will put them on employment. There are many shops and properties, commercial properties that Borough of Barnet has, but they give it to people who have got money. I will train unemployed people, and I will get those shops for these unemployment people that they can earn money. They come off this social benefit, social security, and they can get their income and pay taxes to this government. There are many landlords. Homelessness is this. Landlords do not give their properties to people who are on housing benefit. We have to encourage them to give their properties to these people, and the council pay the full rent. Therefore, they can not be homeless. There are many other things that we have to do.
And that is time.
I hope with this little time I have had, I can tell you, if I am elected and I get vote, I am sure I get vote. I had 10 votes more than Liberal Democrat in last election, 2014. That I will have the vote of my residents.
Now, the next part of this evening is, to some extent, over to you. I thank you, all of you, who sent in so many questions. I have 20 formal questions in front of me. It may not be that everybody is going to want to answer each question, and I may ask for questions in twos if I think they are related. When I call your name, please raise your hand high and wait until the microphone arrives. So, Robert Bacon, where are you? Oh, there we are. It's very handy. I've tried to group these. These are your questions. I've spent the day trying to group them. You must judge how well I managed. I think we're dealing with questions of a fair society, and quite a lot of money matters tonight. Robert, over to you.
Thank you. A lot of parties have ideological spending plans that require a great deal of money to be found. Some can come from efficiency savings, some from cuts, but most will clearly need to come from taxing people more. It's very easy to come up with popular ideas like we want to spend a lot of money to make the best NHS we can get. Yet paying for it is quite another thing, and a great deal of politicians are now quite happy to spend a lot more of other people's money. Quite a lot of us feel we're taxed enough already, and there are a lot of unnecessary or optional public services out there which could and should be cut to balance the income and spending of government. The higher earners already pay a disproportionate amount of tax. Top 1% pay nearly a third of the tax.
Quite right.
And the top 10% pay 3/4 of the tax. So my question with that background is, who would you be taxing to make your spending plans come true?
Thank you very much. Who are you going to tax so you can spend more? You're up first if you want it, Mehdi. Do you want to answer that first? No? Okay. Please. Right. Marisha.
We've committed to eradicate the deficit by 2017-2018, to reduce debt as a percentage of national income, so it is at sustainable levels in a decade. A mixed approach of spending caps and tax rises is what will follow to protect the least well-off and users of public services, to invest extra money for the NHS, to extend the current UK budget protection for education to include early years and 16 to 19 provision, to limit reductions in departmental spending to less than half the rate that was agreed for 2015 to 2016, to limit welfare reductions so we do not destroy the safety net that protects us all in times of crisis that can come to us all. We do not know when it will strike. We will continue to spend 0.7% of the gross national income on international development aid. In addition, I have not noted here, but I am answering the question. After the general election, we will be calling for a full spending review to deliver efficiency savings. I personally have, on a smaller scale in a council, been involved for 8 years in delivering efficiency savings. Your emphasis on tax is not necessarily the right one. If you think that all our public services are as efficient as they can be, you're living in a different world to me.
Thank you, Marisha. Thank you.
We're committed to 30 billion of consolidation over the next 2 years so that we clear the deficit. We think the majority of that should be delivered through reducing spending, because we do believe that people should be able to keep more of their own money. 5 billion we would raise through tackling aggressive tax avoidance, because we think there are too many people who are getting away with not paying their fair share. But we believe that we can cut 13 billion from departmental spending and 12 billion from the welfare bill. It's not out of line with what we've been able to achieve in this Parliament, and we believe that we can do that and also reduce income tax by raising the threshold for people on low incomes. We want to take people on the minimum wage and working 30 hours a week out of income tax altogether, and to back aspiration, we want to ensure that no one pays the 40p higher rate of income tax until they're on 50,000 a year. We think it's important to reward hard work and reward hard-working people in this country.
Thank you. Well, the coalition says that 30 billion is required to overcome our economic problems. Well, I'll tell you how you do that. First of all, we leave the European Union and we save 55 billion. That would save us 55 billion pounds a day in fees that we pay to the government. We would target foreign aid to where it's really needed. Inoculation, health, training projects in agriculture, emergency relief. And what we would stop is giving money to the EU, which is never seen again in foreign aid, or to dubious American companies that are set up in order to handle other people's foreign aid budgets. If the government doesn't know how to do this, then I can recommend a dozen charities that would love to have the money, and by saving 3/4 of this ridiculous 0.7% they've dragged out of nowhere, we would save £9 billion. We are great believers in infrastructure, but HS2 is a big mistake. To destroy the countryside in order to achieve 20 minutes off the time it gets to Birmingham is ludicrous. Sorry? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll never get through the night otherwise. Anyone else want to speak?
The Labour Party have got a costed programme, and I'm afraid it does involve those who are well off making a bit of a contribution, and quite right they should. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. We're going to reimpose the 50p top rate of tax, which is we will fund our NHS through Time to Care Fund, which involves tax levy on the tobacco companies, and also involves also involves a tax on homes over £2 million. I know the Tories really love scaremongering about the mansion tax. Let me just give you a fact in Chipping Barnet. 350 homes in Chipping Barnet are worth over £2 million. 350 properties that won't pay a penny, 39,700 households that won't pay.
The house prices are ridiculous.
And everyone who benefits from increased investment in our NHS. And finally, as another example, we will end non-dom tax status.
You can guess that I'm not terribly keen on the framing of this particular question, and I'm going to be very brief, Bob. 3 examples of the ways in which the money can be raised with which to pay for some of the visions that we have for a fairer society and a more sustainable one, and a repudiation of some of what's been said. So here are just 3 ideas. No more Trident, that's £100 billion over 30 years. The Robin Hood tax, known as the financial transaction tax, that is a tax on the banks. And finally, it is the actual collection of tax that is avoided, evaded, and abandoned. Even a Tory peer recently went public with a statement saying that Cameron's promises to close tax havens abroad was merely a political manoeuvre. There is a move to institute the Robin Hood tax in Europe at the moment, and who is the strongest opponent of that? Who is the strongest opponent of the financial sector actually beginning to pay a little bit back for the bailouts they got over the financial crisis that they caused? It is the British government led by George Osborne and David Cameron. Don't buy that stuff from the Tories about stamping down on taxes. It's not true.
John Dix, where are you? I see him. And while you're getting the microphone, John, Robin McConnell, you're up after that. Can you raise them all? If you're away, people who are late may get a chance. No Robin McConnell. Okay, in that case, Alex Mortram. We'll worry about that in a minute. Let's go to John. Your question.
I did submit 2 questions, but I think I'll pick one. I'd much rather ask about PFI.
No, a brief question now, please.
Corporation tax. In 2010, corporation tax was 28%. Today, it's 20%. Do you think reducing corporation tax has boosted business or simply added to the deficit?
Theresa?
I think it is important that we have business taxes which are as low as possible. The reductions in corporation tax do make us much more competitive. I think that's one of the reasons why we're the fastest growing economy in the G7. I think that's one of the reasons why 2 million jobs have been created, and that's 2 million more people with the security and dignity of being able to earn a wage and take it home to their family. But I also, as I've said a number of times this evening, I think it's important that whilst we have low business taxes, that they are paid, and that's why we're introducing, as well as on the very same day that the 20% rate came into operation, we introduced a diverted profits tax for those businesses that artificially ship their profits abroad to avoid paying any corporation tax. I think that is important, but I also do think that we need to reform the way we run business rates, again because we want to ensure that we do everything possible to support small businesses and local businesses. That's why we're having a major review of business rates, and I hope that helps small businesses.
Victor.
Theresa's right. Increasing corporation tax does not bring the benefits that the questioner thinks. However, I think we should go further with corporation tax. We should actually be reducing corporation tax for small businesses. We should go back to what was a few years ago, when on the first 10,000 of profits for a small business, there was no tax at all. But there are other ways to help small business, and that is to get rid of red tape, most of which comes from Europe, and to have free parking for half an hour in shopping centres. That will help the shops.
The Green Party policy is very straightforward on this. We would raise corporation tax at 30%, but reduce corporation tax on small businesses. John, your question was phrased in a way that I had a little trouble hearing. My worry is, you know, this question of corporation tax and the nomadic businesses. What worries me is businesses that don't pay tax at all. Boots, you know, Amazon, Starbucks. Those are the ones that we should really be focused on, and it would make a huge difference to our economy if those companies paid the tax that was due.
We do agree that Britain should be competitive, and we're going to keep the corporation tax the most competitive in the G7, but it will increase corporation tax very slightly, and that will pay for a cut to small businesses. My dad runs his own small business, and I think he will appreciate that, as I'm sure will 1.5 million other small business owners who will. I think the problem with reducing corporation tax to the extreme, which the Tories have done, it's kind of supported by this myth of a trickle-down effect. But I just remind you that profits have risen a lot faster than wages in the last 5 years. And I think we should be asking corporations to pay a little bit more, and also giving support to small businesses. Thank you.
Right, let's move on. Robin McConnell, this is your last call. Absent or asleep. Alex Mortram. There's a question beginning to rise in my mind about why. Jenny Kobish, are you here? Hooray! We're on to welfare. There's a microphone arriving, Jenny. Eventually.
Can the candidates tell us how the extension of the right to buy to tenants of housing associations will impact on the chronic shortage of social housing in the country, and especially in our borough?
If I take Victor first, do you want to follow?
The question is absolutely correct. It's not going to improve the situation with social housing at all. And at a time of housing crisis, and some people don't seem to understand that there is a severe crisis in housing, it's that rather than having the right to buy for housing association tenants, we should be rapidly extending the amount of housing in total and affordable housing in particular. According to the London plan, there should be 40% affordable housing in every major housing development. Well, in Barnet, for example, you'll be lucky if you can find 25%, and in some developments there was no social housing whatsoever. And this is copied in other boroughs in London, not necessarily all of them, I have to say, Conservative. There's at least one Labour borough that's following the same policy. So there's a lot to say about housing, but I'll try and stick to the subject. Yes, I'm a great believer in housing associations, and indeed also in council housing. The borough of Barnet built a huge number of council houses last year, 4. A total of 4. So that's it's only 3. Sorry, I exaggerate. It's only 3. Well, we're certainly not going to get to the bottom of the crisis that way.
Thank you, Jenny. The simple answer is it will be an unmitigated disaster. I've never known phone, so many housing chiefs write to me. I mean, I'm just a young woman, but so many housing chiefs have written to me saying, what are the Tories doing? This is going to destroy the social housing stock in the short term and in the long term. So rather than sell off other people's assets, which is an extraordinary thing for a Conservative party to be proposing at a knockdown price as well, we need to be building more affordable homes. Labour has a plan to get 1 million homes started and will prioritise investment in affordable housing and homes for social rent and help councils to get the finance they need to build more homes. And that's the only way you're actually going to improve the supply of affordable housing.
This is a very difficult issue, but you know, this right to buy will be different from the way the right to buy operated in the 1980s, because the way this scheme will work is that those houses which are sold will be replaced by new affordable homes. We are going to fund this policy through the sale of more expensive local authority-owned properties. That will raise £4.5 billion. That will fund the policy and enable the proceeds of these sales to be reinvested in building new affordable homes. It will also fund a brownfield regeneration fund, which will enable local authorities to bring more brownfield land back into use. So this is about delivering more homes to all people.
Do not listen to Labour, do not listen to the Tories. They have taken a holiday from building houses over longer than my lifetime. So please do not listen to whoever is speaking on behalf of them. We have a commitment to build 300,000 new homes. You will ask me where, when and how. We have transport links in place for them and planned in our manifesto. They would not be on the green belt. We are planning garden cities, and this is a realistic plan. Please vote for us, remembering that we can deliver real change. Indeed, 3/4 of our manifesto from 2010 have been delivered. Thank you.
Bob, do you have other questions on housing, or shall I get everything I want to say about housing out now? Let's hope there's another one. Okay, Jenny, what the New Statesman has now chosen to call the wrong to buy. That the sell-off of social housing is a catastrophe which has now come to pass, and we now see it. The headline in The Independent today, 50,000 families have left London. Some of them have left Barnet. Most of them came from evicted by private landlords, owing to the fact that the housing market in London has gone loopy and lost all sense of reality. And what we're finding is that the poorest people, the most vulnerable, the ones for which our level of civilization is measured, how we treat the most vulnerable in our society, they are being victimized. And Barnet is particularly egregious in this respect. The so-called regenerations are actually redevelopments for the rich, and in the case of West Hendon, through a very murky deal, the costs of which are not clear, but Mrs. Angry suggests were very, very few indeed. The idea of continuing to sell off on a subsidized level housing for the most poor and most needy in our society is so appalling that I cannot believe we are actually talking about it in this room. I think I saw a friend from Sweetsway walking in here earlier. And there you are, hi. I cannot tell you how heartbroken I have been to see the way that the poor are being hammered in our borough. We must not stand for it, and I personally, this used to be Green Party policy, but I personally would still hold with moving our bureaucratic capital out of London and up to the north in order to take away the hothouse effect we have here in London, which is taking us all into crisis, whereby our children are unable to afford to move out and establish their own homes. All of us are implicated in this disaster before long.
Before I move on to Alex, who is here, could I just ask you, this is about getting involved. If your involvement is too vocal, the people who, especially at the back, would quite like to hear what's being said can't. So, if you could just sort of, curb your enthusiasm, a lot of us would be very grateful. Alex, your question, please.
Good evening. I've actually sent an email to all the candidates, and I expect to get the answers to all the questions. But here, I'm allowed to only ask one question. What's your position and your party's position regarding the under-occupancy charge or the Diverted tax? The reason I ask for your personal position as well as your party's is because I want to see how independent you are from your party. So what's been the most radical opposition you've had to your own party in your activities? Thank you.
The question as written was, what is the candidate's position and his or her party's position regarding the under-occupancy charge, or what many people call the bedroom tax? Would he or she and his party scrap the charge, in particular for disabled people, should they be elected, was what was printed. Who'd like to go first on that? I'm going to say no, because you've been first nearly every time. Yeah? Right.
Ed Miliband hasn't been too shy about this, but Labour will take great pleasure in relieving the plight of the poorest in our community by abolishing the bedroom tax, which is a particular only penalises the poor.
The rationale behind the scrapping of the spare room subsidy is that we need to make sure that we use our affordable and social housing stock as efficiently as we can. It doesn't seem fair to ask the taxpayer to subsidise people to live in houses which are larger than they need, when so many others need homes. That is the rationale. We also needed to get the housing benefit bill under control. Under Labour, the maximum you could claim in housing benefit was £104,000 a year. We thought that was unfair to ask taxpayers to pay for people to live in homes that those earning a living couldn't afford to live in. So I think this is an important change, and it also introduces fairness because it applies the same rule in the social rented sector as in the private rented sector.
Well, I'm a bloody-minded kind of person, but on this issue, I don't deviate from my party's line to answer the question. UKIP and I are absolutely against the bedroom tax. It's foul. It should never have been introduced. I'm not interested in the so-called savings which come as a result of it. It's caused great hardship to a great many people, and especially to disabled people. And if we are expecting people to downsize and move to smaller places, where are the smaller places for them to do that?
The party says we would scrap the bedroom tax. I say we would scrap the bedroom tax. We recognise that it is good to use properties efficiently. I would be delighted to enter into a conversation with people about how we can best deploy social housing for those most in need of it. But the level of mistrust, quite justifiably, that we have in the current government doesn't allow for that kind of conversation, and certainly not in this borough. So just scrap it. Wait for a better dispensation before we have those conversations.
I personally am against the bedroom tax, and that's the way I stand, not necessarily in agreement with my party all the time.
Move on to education questions now. Ruth Levin. very much. And then immediately before you answer, I'd like a second question which is related to the same thing from Jenny Woods. Where are you, Jenny? I'm feeling really unpopular.
Don't take it personally, Bob. From us.
Jenny, are you here? No? Right, well, the people who came with late questions may get your opportunity yet. Ruth, off you go.
Thank you. What is your view of the expansion of free school provision and the removal of local democratic control over the provision of education to people in Chipping Barnet?
Could I also take Nancy Alvarez Tobacco? Are you here? Oh, hello. Is that Jenny waving at me? Nancy, right. Over there, Jenny. You never know she'd been to Akhavan this morning, the way she's moving. Right, Nancy.
I'm the mother of an autistic child. When he was at preschool age, there was only one nursery that was willing to take him in, and that was Valley Preschool. Thanks to them, he was able to integrate with other children, and he received a statement of special education needs. But now with the demise of Valley Preschool, I fear that other families in the neighborhood won't be as lucky as I was. If elected, what would you do to ensure to bring back a neighborhood resource like Valley Preschool so that disabled children can get a chance to a nursery? Thank you.
Thank you. So the question is on schooling in the borough. Poppy.
The plight of the Valley's preschool is one that has worried me a lot. I think it's very symbolic of a lot of what is going on in this borough. I was involved in trying to save the Valley preschool. I wrote a letter to the press, you may have seen it. The point about community-provided services, which is the Green Party's preferred way of providing most public services, co-production through people providing it themselves, is that you get the service you need. Thus, Valley Preschool was willing to take funded pupils from morning session till afternoon session, allowing parents to go off to work all day long. Now, what's going to happen in Dollis Valley when the new commercial provider comes in, because the community-provided nursery has lost, in fact, it has not only lost its ability to function, it has been closed early. So its 16 children have no preschool provision now until the commercial enterprise opens. When will that be? We don't know. It's supposed to be in September, but we all know how these kinds of schedules can slip. A commercial provider will perhaps take funded pupils, children, although for them it's a loss maker. But they will certainly, for any extra hours, not charge £5 an hour, they will charge at least £15 an hour. That is potentially 15 sets of parents not able to work anymore. And I think this is absolutely paradigmatic of why private is not always better than public. Quite the opposite. Save Valley Preschool, bring it back.
So, free school provision in the borough. Trevethan?
I'm a great supporter of our free schools programme. We've had a number of new free schools set up in the borough. In this constituency, there's St Andrew the Apostle Greek Orthodox Secondary School is the first ever school in the Greek Orthodox tradition established in the United Kingdom. I believe that actually these schools are an emanation of the community. Yes, they're not tied to local authority control in the way schools used to be, but they are brilliant schools and they're delivering brilliant results, and I think it would be a real shame if a Labour government decided they were going to shut them down. On special needs, it is of course crucial that we do all that we can to support parents of children with special needs and children with disabilities. We've significantly increased the number of places for children with special needs, and part due to our free schools programme, because so many of them specialise and provide excellent provision for children with special needs. And it's always been a priority of mine to help my constituents whenever they approach me to ensure that they can get the best possible education for their children.
Barnet, I've dealt with a family who were trying to get a place at a forced academy school, struggled to get that place, and when they came to me as a counsellor, I couldn't actually influence that school because in this academy we don't talk to local authorities or locally elected representatives. Second one, a family who had a child who was being bullied, again had been forced to become an academy, and there was nothing that locally elected representatives could do about that. They had to go to the DfE, and obviously it took ages, I don't think it's even been resolved yet. Labour aren't going to close free schools, but we will stop the expansion of free schools and divert that money into places where places are needed. On the Valley Preschool, I spent a lot of time with the chair of trustees at the Valley School over the past 12 months, 10 months, trying to help him put together a competitive bid, but the fact was this council, this Tory council, wanted to privatise it. They wanted to hand it over to a commercial provider, and I agree, I'm really concerned about what happens to families with educational needs, more disadvantaged families. Will they be able to get the same access to childcare from this new private provider? It's something as a local councillor, maybe the local MP, I'll be watching very carefully. I think it's a real shame that that asset has been lost from our community.
The provision of school places here and in many areas is really important. I have noticed, my own niece was granted her school place in another borough earlier in the week, last week. And I have noticed the difference it makes when you have less places than you need. It puts pressure on the children. They're competing. Is that right for children who are aged 3 and 4? Is that right for children who are not yet teenagers? For me, it's not right. So for me, the most important question is, do we have enough good quality places? And that is the important question. We should not be making children compete with each other. It's not right. They shouldn't be competing for school places like people applying for jobs. It's not right.
I think I got the gist of the question, but forgive me if I haven't answered it directly. That's because perhaps I didn't hear it clearly. But if this is to do with governance of schools, UKIP believes in choice. We believe in parental choice. The wider the range of schools, the better, whether they are under the council, whether they are free schools, or whatever. We believe in faith schools, and I was sorry to hear Tristram Hunt, the Labour spokesman, the other day on television condemning Catholic schools. I can't think why he did that, but he hasn't retracted his condemnation. So we believe in that. However, we also believe that there should be a restoration of grammar schools. So, Well, there was a time when Labour supporters were all in favour, because grammar schools are the best way to allow working class kids who are bright enough and hard working enough to actually get on in life. And we can give the opportunity to any school that wishes to turn itself into a grammar school to do so. Now, our party's policy is to have one grammar school in every town. I don't think that's good enough, because that will become monopolised by middle class parents. We need more schools, more grammar schools than that. So, yeah, parental choice. That's what we stand for.
Right, thank you. Still on education, but this time the question of libraries in the borough. Rita Attree. Right. There's a microphone on its way. And Angela Cantor. Thank you. You'll immediately following, please. It's just behind you.
Good evening. My question is actually directed at Theresa Villiers, who made a statement in February 2015 supporting Barnet libraries. And what I want to know, is that general election rhetoric, or does she really believe that we still need the libraries? And what is she planning to do, seeing that her fellow Tory councillors actually voted for these huge cuts in the services for libraries.
There is a second library-related question which will apply to all candidates. So while the microphone is travelling around the room, give Theresa a chance to phrase her answers. So, keep going. Can you raise your hand? There we go. That should be Angela Cantor there.
Yes, I just wanted to know what all the candidates' views were of the proposals for Barnet libraries.
Thank you very much. Theresa.
Well, I can give a very simple answer to the first question. Yes, I do support our libraries. And yes, I am opposing any plans for closure of any of our libraries in this constituency. I think they all need to stay open because they are all a very valuable resource for our community. I will continue to campaign to keep all of our libraries open in Chipping Barnet.
I don't know where you were last Saturday, at least I do know. Because you were seen door knocking on Leicester Road when the rest of us were marching for the libraries. And I think you can, all of you in this room who've heard me speak so far can guess what my view is on the idea of limiting our few remaining social spaces where we can come together and effect genuine democracy. As I said on the march on Saturday, my first public meeting was upstairs in North Finchley Library with some cabinet member, and although the contents of the meeting went straight over my head, I had an education in what democracy looks like, in how elected representatives get eyeballed by their constituents and get to answer their questions on the record, in public. That kind of education in democracy is what's being shut down if we shut certain libraries or shrink them down to the size of a large living room.
Those of you who remember your history lessons at school will recall that both Disraeli and Gladstone passed legislation to set up what became a local authority system that was the envy of the world. It provided services of all sorts. I won't name them all, but libraries were one of them, which enabled children and adults to actually get on in life by using the services of their local library. So what we've had recently, of course, is local authorities starved of funds, so they have to make cuts. Some of them make those cuts reluctantly. Some of them, like Barnet, make them with gusto. I have news for you. If the Conservatives get back in, they're going to make 13 billion of what they call departmental cuts. Well, what do you think that means in plain English? That means more cuts in services. So watch out. Libraries are only just the start.
I was a member of a council under Liberal Democrat control. We opened an amazing new library. We built a modern, state-of-the-art library. And then we closed the small library. That is the way to close libraries. That is the only way that this community should accept the closure of libraries. I advise you to join the Liberal Democrat campaign against closure of libraries.
I think the proposals are extremely worrying. When I was a kid, I used to go to Chipping Barnet Library all the time. I used to revise there because otherwise I'd sit at home playing Mario Kart, and I think the library was a better place for me to be. And we've got proposals from the Conservative Council to shrink East Barnet, South Free and Osage libraries to 3% of the size of Chipping Barnet Library. Perhaps fit a newspaper rack in there, but not much else. And I really enjoyed being with Poppy and loads of other people from all parts of the community on Saturday marching against these cuts. The reality is the Tories on Barnet Council have had plans to close the libraries since the mid-2000s. As Victor was saying, it's now become more politically convenient for them to do so, and they actually seem to be enjoying imposing this kind of shutdown on our public spaces, public educational spaces, as they stand. So yeah, they are worrying, and I hope to join you continue the fight against library closures.
Down to a very specific local issue now. Stamo, are you here? Yes. Right. Put your hand right up so that Julie can see. And this is very specific. As written, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Barnet Council is relocating the Mill Hill Waste Depot from Mill Hill to Oakley Road South, creating various problems. I would like to know, all of you, whether we are against or in favour, and why, and what do you think the social cost is?
Very much. So the social issues of moving the waste depot from Mill Hill to Oakley Road South.
Which one of us wants to talk rubbish?
I'm happy to give a view on this. I want to correct some misinformation about this. It isn't a proposal to build a waste disposal facility. It is a proposal to replace, as the questioner has said, to move the depot for the council's refuse vehicles from Mill Hill to Abbott's Depot. I believe that the closure of the Winter Skip site is a positive aspect of this proposal. Winter Skips has been a menace to local residents for many years. It has very significant numbers of lorry movements, and so I believe that the refuse depot proposal is preferable to Winter Skips carrying on as it is. I think it's important to know that the number of lorry journeys will reduce as a result of what the council is proposing, but I urge all residents to take part in the consultation. I think the Mill Hill depot at Abbott's Depot will be better than the status quo because it will get rid of winters, but now is the opportunity for all residents to make their voice heard to decide what the future of this proposal is.
Here, here. I agree with everything Theresa said about that issue, and you won't find me saying that many times this evening.
Too many luxury developments in Mill Hill. That's the problem.
There are great social costs to the proposal. It's a densely populated residential site for those of you who don't know, bang opposite some playing fields where lots of kids go to play. I'm a bit concerned that the council decided to plonk this depot next to the social housing estate. Perhaps they thought the residents wouldn't fight back, but I'm really glad that they are, and the Labour Party is right behind it. You know, councillors Kaye and Andreas have been proposing amendments to get the council to stop and think and perhaps look at alternative sites. If I was elected your MP, I'd be sitting down with leaders of other councils to see if there were any alternative sites that this could go. We recently had a road accident in Oakley Road South with extra big recycling vehicles, refuse trucks. That risk potentially increases, so right behind you, good luck.
I do say that talking rubbish is my favourite subject. I am very, very interested in waste, or rather, in minimising it. Some of you know that Barnet Green Party sent you a reply to your question, supporting you for a number of reasons. One is that we believe Barnet Council handled this whole issue disgracefully, in its usual disgraceful way. They knew that they were going to have to dispose of the Mill Hill depot, but did they set up, alternatives in time? No. So they spent way over the odds on the Winters site, wasting our tax money again. As you know, the Green Party is extremely anxious to create as fast as possible what we might think of as a zero waste society. And I would like us, localizing all our use of resources, which means using them and recycling them, reusing them locally. That would involve a certain amount of local waste management, but with luck, not one that is dumped on one community, taking on the responsibility for the whole of the borough. So there you go. We support you.
Now, I'm aware that I've run over. I knew it was going to happen. You are now realising just what I have to put up with on a Sunday morning, sitting on those pews for rather a long time. But could you bear one more set of questions? Going from the local now to international issues, I have 5 more questions that were handed in. Can you bear to hear those? In which case, Michael Franklin, where are you?
My question is, I do agree with the Bishop of Manchester, who says that Britain has a moral duty to take in refugees from those areas of conflict in which this country has been involved.
I'm tempted to give them a chance to think about that, because that's a bit of a curveball. Who would like to start? There are 4 more questions after this. Well, it doesn't relate at all to it. So I would like to hear answers on this. Victor, do you want to go?
The short answer, because we have a lack of time, is yes, of course Britain has a moral duty to do so. And I mentioned earlier that Nigel Farage, on behalf of our party, suggested that the British government take in a fair proportion of Christian and other religious minority refugees from Syria and Iraq. And after all, who was it who caused the problem in Iraq in the first place? It was Britain. Partly with America. That's Tony Blair's fault. And of course, Mr. Cameron has done the same thing in Libya. Well, you've seen the results. So yes, of course we should, but we should do so not because of some mock attempt by the European Union, who really can't make up their mind about the issue, but under the United Nations Council of Refugees, they have suggested X, Y, and Z, and that's exactly what we should do.
Not only a moral duty, but an international obligation. There is no question that, of course, we owe it to refugees to give them somewhere to live under the human rights regime. There is very little left to us, or there might be little left to us, other than human rights. We must cleave to them with all our might and not let these people behind scrap the Human Rights Act.
Stop borrowing! Frank, do you want to go now?
The answer is yes. Of course, this country has always been a safe haven for refugees, and that should continue. And to be honest, we owe that duty regardless of whether people are coming from places in which we have been involved, or whether they are coming from other difficult trouble spots around the world.
The answer is yes, but it's more than a moral duty. We have a practical duty. We have a practical duty to enable all from all around the world to thrive here and to make it an even better country than it is already.
Yeah, I'm mostly going to repeat what the other people have said. Absolutely, we do have an obligation to take these people in. We're in a church today, and I think it's an important thing to remember that we welcome the stranger. And for me, hospitality is about what it means to be British. So, of course, we should welcome those in need, and if they don't have anything, where they're left behind.
Neil Kovish. Keep your hand up so then Judy can see where you are.
All right, I can try shouting. Can you hear me?
I think probably for the people in the far corner, a microphone will help.
Thank you. In 2012, William Hague hailed the Balance of Competences Review as the most extensive analysis of the impact of the membership of the EU ever undertaken. The overwhelming judgment of businesses, organisations and individuals is understood to have been that our EU membership is about right and for many sectors absolutely essential. Why are the findings of this report not being given prominence in this election when they could well be crucial to making an informed decision between the parties?
You're right, Europe hasn't really featured much in this election campaign, But I think it should do, because I think the people of this country should be given the choice about our future relationship with Europe, and that's why the Conservatives would give them an in-out referendum on the European Union by the end of 2017. It's time for people to have their say on our future relationship with Europe.
Yes, we know why David Cameron has agreed to that. It's because he's frightened of voters deserting the Conservative Party and coming to UKIP. Now, it isn't actually true that all of business supports the idea of being members of the European Union. But let me make plain what UKIP's position is. We want the closest possible alliance with Europe. We want a free trading agreement with Europe. We want cooperation with Europe in as many fields as is feasible. What we don't want, however, is to be ruled from Brussels by an unelected bureaucracy. Thank you for that. But it's 40 years since the British people had a chance to vote on this issue. They thought at the time, incorrectly, that they were voting for an economic agreement. In fact, the evidence was there at the time, as both Wedgwood Ben and Enoch Powell tried to make plain, but nobody listened to them, that in fact the reason for the formation of the economic community and eventually the United States of Europe was political. Article 4 of the Treaty of Rome, which Edward Heath signed up to. Now, how much longer can this country go on with one foot in and one foot out of the European Union? We're not in the Euro. Some people think we should be. Not very many. But that is going to be an inevitable result. Now, in the Lisbon Treaty, only two countries, Britain and Denmark, have the opt-out of joining the Euro. All the others, if they're not in it already, will have to join. Now, sooner or later, we're going to have to make the decision, do we want to have a different relationship with Europe, and you cannot negotiate that from within. Juncker's made it plain, Merkel's made it plain, you can't do it. The only way you can do it is to leave, and there is an option under the Lisbon Treaty for us to do that, Norway's done it after all, and then negotiate a close trading agreement, and that's what we would like.
The Green Party is very conflicted about Europe. On the one hand, we're internationalists. We know that there are many issues that need international management, and we are also grateful for all the human rights, the rights at work, and the environmental regulations that we have been blessed with thanks to Europe. However, there is this incredibly huge elephant in the room that an awful lot of us here may not even have heard of, that is being negotiated between Europe and the United States, known as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, otherwise as TTIP. Thank you. Some of you do know of it, and the reason that you are clapping is because you know how central this particular purported agreement, proposed agreement, could be to our lives in future. This agreement is a so-called free trade agreement. Do we have a separate question on that, Bob, or can I... We do? Shall I leave it for that?
Talk to it now and not answer the next one.
All right. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is a big corporation creation, the most wide-ranging and massive so-called free trade agreement of its kind. It is being negotiated in secret, but much has been already leaked between, as I say, the European Commission and the United States. And for the most part, we have hardly any tariff barriers between Europe and the United States. So what is this agreement going to amount to? What actually will happen, what it is envisaging, is something known as harmonization of regulation, otherwise known as a race to the bottom. Most of the regulations in the United States on animal welfare, on rights at work, on environmental regulation are far, far, far lower than ours, and harmonization would inevitably mean a race to the bottom. But most alarmingly, most alarming is the ISDS The mechanism, so-called investor-state disputes resolution mechanism, whereby a corporation is given the status of a sovereign government, and with that status it can sue any other sovereign government for any potential loss of profits as a result of that government's actions. So here are some examples from extant ISDSs. Philip Morris is suing Australia because Australia is requiring the tobacco companies to sell cigarettes with plain packaging. Phil, you can help me on this one. Who is suing Egypt for raising its minimum wage? Veolia is suing Egypt for raising its minimum wage. It would lock in any NHS privatisation because we would not be able to reclaim it. Now, there are a couple of points on TTIP that I want to make now before the others have their say. One, we are the only party that stands against TTIP, root and branch, because those seeking to exemptions for it, for example, for the NHS, are kidding themselves. Once the agreement goes through, ways around those exemptions will be found. And secondly, this is the biggest threat to our democracy, because governments will be constrained to do as the corporates want. How much democracy is going to be left if TTIP goes through? All the other parties are for it. It is one of the main planks on which I am standing. I will return to that in my summing up later.
In fairness to the other candidates, I think we ought to hear that question. Phil, where are you? Here. I can hear your voice behind the pillar. The microphone is behind you and coming. This is the question that Poppy leapt into by telepathy. Okay. I'll try and use the microphone properly. Yes. That's okay, yes. My question was, currently, negotiations on TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, as you all know now, are being carried out between the EU and the US. These are carried out in secret. Do the candidates consider that TTIP is to be a grave danger to democracy or a boost to the economy? Thank you very much. And I will, obviously, people who've spoken already to the first question get a second bite at this. Do you want to go now or in a minute, Victor, Theresa, or would you like to go in a minute? Right. Carry on.
I'm a supporter of the TTIP negotiations. I think that they can potentially dramatically boost economic growth. I think they can mean more jobs. I think they will mean a wider range of products. I think that will mean lower prices. But also, this is a chance for Europe and the US working together to set global standards. This is an opportunity which we may not have for much longer because of the developing economies around the rest of the world may not buy into our very high standards. I think the idea that the EU is somehow going to sell everyone down the road and rush for lower standards of employment laws and animal welfare and climate, when the EU has been pushing out very high standards and high regulation on all these areas for the last 50 years. It's not going to suddenly dramatically change its culture because it's negotiating with the United States. This is about free trade, which has delivered prosperity across many parts of the world. I think working together, the United States and the European Union can actually deliver a good deal and boost our prosperity. It will not force the NHS to be privatised. And the ISDS system is just about holding governments to the contracts that they agree and treating them like any citizen. So if they want to terminate a contract, they have to pay compensation accordingly.
I'd like to speak on the initial question first, and first of all thank the person who raised the issue for bringing to the fore the fact that we actually gain a lot from Europe. They are trading partners. It is incorrect to ignore the fact that if we were to leave, we would not be leaving solely on our terms, and what would happen to our goods and services would not necessarily be determined just by us. It is unrealistic to think that one party in a negotiation holds all the cards. That is not the way that any negotiation pans out. And I see my questioner nodding. I thank him very heartily for bringing up the issue that there is unbiased coverage on Europe. And I advise you, if you have already made up your mind, reconsider. If you have not yet made up your mind, think very carefully, because this is not an emotional matter, it's a financial matter.
Yeah, corruption.
As far as other negotiations are concerned, one, I will let you into a secret. This is a subject of heated discussion within my party. I believe that on all negotiations, the important facts lie in the detail. I have a natural liberal tendency to feel that I don't approve of things which are carried out in secret, but I do understand that commercial negotiations sometimes need to be carried out in secret. I will not pronounce on what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, but I will be looking, I hope I am around in 30 years' time, I will be looking at carefully in 30 years' time to see what all politicians have done, and particularly those Liberal Democrat politicians whom I have supported. I hope you will accept my response in that spirit.
On the European Union, Labour believes that our place as Britain lies at the heart of the reformed European Union. UKIP seem to think that we can negotiate these trade agreements. They don't seem to have calculated how expensive those trade agreements are going to be if we did leave the EU. And what would happen to British citizens who've left British shores and are living in European countries? That's quite clear. Question about the Boswell report, the review of the balance of the The reason why that's been squashed is because it actually contradicts what UKIP have said about, I made a note of it somewhere. What did you say? It was a bureaucracy, some sort of bureaucratic monster that was bearing down on all our freedoms, and it's a miracle we can even breathe. The Boswell report actually says that there's no case for leaving the European Union. The reason the Tories aren't talking about that is because they're really scared of the
Ukraine. Ask the Greeks.
So, sorry, where was the one you asked? Did you ask it? I want to look at the person who asked. Okay, I thought. You're right to be concerned about the threat that TTIP poses to public ownership of our public services and potentially to labour laws, labour standards, food safety standards. And Labour Party is quite clear that any treaty that Europe signs with the US should not be allowed to water down labour standards. Glenis Willmott, who's the leader of the Labour Party in the European Parliament, recently got the agreement of Socialist and Democratic MEPs in the European Parliament that to not support a treaty that includes the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. So we will not support a treaty that includes that kind of parallel system of justice for corporations. And we will protect the right of governments to legislate in the interest of public policy objectives. But the negotiations haven't closed yet, so I can't really comment on the finished proposal.
Well, MEPs can talk as much as they like, but they actually have no power over the decisions of the Brussels bureaucracy. Now, Britain is the 6th largest economy in the world and the 3rd largest in Europe. We're big enough, strong enough, old enough, mature enough to make our own decisions. We don't need them made for us by Brussels. We are strong believers in international trade. Britain should resume its position on the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, GATT, negotiate our own trading agreements with the United States and anybody else, and not have them done on our behalf, thank you very much, by people who are not democratically responsible.
Thank you. This is the last question before you're summing up. Hugh Godwin, where are you? Hugh, raise a hand. Thank you. It's coming behind you.
I think it was partly covered earlier on, but it's about tax avoidance. I'd like to hear, certainly from Theresa and from Amy, what your actual practical policies would be to stop multinationals paying minimal tax in our country.
And I would just like to say that in Hugh's written question, the thing that struck me was that he asked, what can our MPs realistically achieve? So rather than rhetoric, realism, ladies and gentlemen. Who'd like to go first?
We've already started on this. As I mentioned before, we've introduced a diverted profits tax, which addresses one of the problems, the artificial shifting of profits outside the UK jurisdiction to lower tax jurisdictions. We have also been pressing offshore jurisdictions linked to the UK to clean up their acts, and we've seen a lot of changes there, but we'll continue to work to make sure we must have more transparency about who owns what. That is a crucial part of addressing this problem. That's why we've agreed to introduce some of the most transparent rules anywhere in the world in relation to company ownership. And we also do have to make sure that we take as many jurisdictions with us as possible. That's why David Cameron put it at the top of the agenda for the G8 when he was president. And his conference on these matters in County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland was the start of the fight back by governments across the world so that we make sure that we can keep collecting those taxes, and we do all our very best as well to make sure, particularly important, that developing nations can collect their taxes as well. That work has gone from the G8 to the OECD and the G20. It will take some time. These are massively technical areas, but the reality is the rules on international allocation of profits date back in substance to the 1930s. They need to change. They are changing. We are already taking significant steps to deal with this, but to really crack this problem, we need to sort it out at an international level, and that's why we're doing it.
To rare agreement with Theresa. It does require fundamentally international cooperation, and it is obviously difficult to do unilaterally. The key focus obviously should be on transparency, making sure we know where taxes are paid by who, and trying to claim back what's rightfully owed in Britain. I just think it does really require concerted international action. It's going to take a lot of effort, but it will be worth it.
Marisha? Victor? Marisha?
Very briefly, I can't answer in detail, but we are committed to clamping down on international tax avoidance, and we will be pushing for this to be taking place sooner, in fact rapidly rather than later.
I had the pleasure of meeting Mccarthy, former Deputy Chair of the Liberal Democrat Party. He has just published a book called The Prostitute State, the first chapter of which describes in detail how every one of the initiatives that he sought to bring to bear on the Liberal Democrat Party was founded on the rocks of the corporate support that the Liberal Democrats had. He was in a meeting where he was putting forward a resolution to take off the executive of the party, representative of Rio Tinto Zinc, because that company was breaking environmental and human rights rules all over the place. And Paddy Ashdown, who was leader at the time, said, let me just say, if you pass this resolution, I will resign. When you have the big corporates holding your political parties by the short and curlies, don't believe that they have the political will to do anything about tax avoidance except in terms of so-called political gestures, as I mentioned to you earlier, where the Tory peer actually admitted that this is what Cameron was doing. You need the political will, and with it, you can make much more progress than we have seen.
has many surprises, and one of them is how much I agree with the Green Party. Well, the government has had 5 years to crack down on tax avoidance. It's not an easy matter. Closing down overseas tax havens is very difficult, and it has to be done by international agreement. But it could have been done a lot faster. So action has to be taken on that. It has to be taken on the non-doms, as they are called, and on all the big corporations that don't pay their fair share of tax, some of whom sign letters to the Telegraph saying that they're very happy if a Conservative government is returned to power. They sign these letters on their way, of course, to a peerage.
Well, thank you very much for a fascinating collection of questions. It's now time to sum up. 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. And in the drawer at the start of this evening, Poppy, you managed to draw first both times. 2 minutes.
It's obviously my night tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that what I will do in these summing up points is return to TTIP. TTIP is one of the main reasons that I am standing in this election today, and it is the first symbol on the back of my leaflet, Stop TTIP. I want to have an opportunity, and therefore you all get the same opportunity, to vote and signal to Westminster that they must scrap TTIP. In the manifesto of, in the manifesto of the Labour Party, it says, we support TTIP in principle. You have here the Labour candidate telling you that a Labour person in Brussels has sought an exemption from TTIP of the ISDS. Be aware, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Be aware, Alan, what? No, you have abstained from votes, am I right on this, Adele? They have abstained from votes on TTIP, where the Greens have been fighting like crazy, and in Europe we have a presence. Thank you. Labour voted for TTIP in Europe. There is another agreement called CETA, which is the equivalent Canadian agreement with Europe. Should the ISDS is still in it, should that go through, an American corporation needs only to use its Canadian office with which to sue European governments. Please try it. This is actually your last chance, and today again. We have a Labour candidate who refuses to repudiate TTIP entirely and assure us that she will fight tooth and nail if she is elected against TTIP. The Tories, of course, they're a lost cause on this. Vote Green, vote against TTIP.
Right, thank you. And now, Marisha, to sum up, please.
First of all, I would like to thank you, and also for the people who have organised this. This is one of the oldest buildings in the constituency, and it's a real honour to be speaking with you in this building. So thank you all. I've spoken at many hustings in my time, but not one as grand as this, nor with an audience as responsive as this one. I'm going to do things in reverse order, so I'm going to tell you a little about me. I spent 8 years as a councillor in a borough in Lib Dem control, raising standards from being what the Audit Commission called poor to being outstanding. I worked on health, I worked on crime, and I worked on the performance of all council services, and my personal contribution was to take them from good to outstanding, the most difficult part of the journey. I studied science as a student, and I worked as a physicist for a number of years in research, both in industry and also in academia. I also worked in information technology. I worked in a major retailer on their supply chain. I dealt with the whole of the supply chain. I worked with suppliers in Israel, in Egypt, in Morocco and Sri Lanka. I made them more efficient. When I say that I know how to make this country give you more money without pain, I know what I am talking about. This is not true of every member of my party. this is particular to me. I say it last because I know, first of all, you wanted to hear what my party was promising, but I am asking you to vote for me. I'm also asking you to consider the fact that in the area where I was elected, I was known for solving the problems that the MPs in that area couldn't solve. People came to me because they said, we hear you're good at getting things done. We hear you don't give up. We hear that you'll do things for us. I have never given up on a person's problem when they come to me with their crisis, whoever they are, rich, poor, in hardship, living far away, young or old. I have never given up. Please vote for me.
Victor. Sorry. Victor first, and then you, Theresa.
Right, I'm throwing away the 2 minutes summing up that I had prepared because there's a point I've been hoping to raise this evening, and that is to bust the biggest myth in this election that seems to be accepted by almost everyone, and that's the myth of coalition's competence with the economy. Now, they inherited a government deficit in annual expenditure of 40 billion, which they have turned currently into a deficit of 90 billion. They call that halving the deficit. So remember, in newspeak, halving means doubling. They've done the same thing. They've done the same thing to the government national debt, which stood at a horrendous, eye-watering £0.7 trillion under Labour, and they've doubled it to £1.5 trillion. That's called, quote, paying down the national debt. Thank you very much. Yes, and on top of that, we've got the worst productivity in the G20 and the worst balance of trade since 1948. So where is the competence with these people? It doesn't exist. It's a complete myth. And why does everybody accept it? Because the press tell you to accept it. You know, it's based on the idea that the bigger the fib and the more often you tell it, the more people are going to believe it. Well, it ain't bloody well true. Do forgive me swearing. And if I've got 1 minute, I just want to mention one more thing, and that is something called Remploy. Anyone ever heard of it? Yes, it was an organisation set up at the end of the war to employ with dignity people who were mentally or physically disabled but still able to work. There were workshops all over the place. The nearest one to here, I think, was Edgware. 5 years ago, there were 3,000 people still working in Remploy workshops. What did this coalition do? They closed down Remploy. Thank you. Not a peep from the Liberal Democrat allies of the Conservatives, not a peep. But the minister at the time said, don't worry, we'll find jobs for all these disabled people. Well, I have to tell you, it was published last week, 1,500 out of the 3,000 have not found jobs. There they are, sitting at home, looking at the four walls, worrying about the bedroom tax, and with no dignity. And if you're looking for one small reason to get rid of this coalition, that's it.
Some things, but I profoundly disagree with your analysis of the economy. When this coalition took office almost exactly 5 years ago, we faced a situation, a deficit which was as serious as any country in Europe, on a par with Portugal, with Greece. Now, look at the situation. We've halved the deficit. Inflation is at zero. We've had record low interest rates for 5 years. There are 2 million more people in work. There are record numbers of women in work. The gender pay gap has been almost eliminated. Income tax has been cut for 24 million people. 3 million are now paying no income tax at all. We have the fastest growing economy in the G7. We've reformed welfare so it rewards work. Living standards are rising. We've increased funding on the NHS. It's delivering 1 million more operations every year than it did in the last Parliament. There are nearly 9,500 extra doctors working for the NHS, nearly an extra 6,900 nurses, more clinical staff in the NHS than at any time in its history. This is a success story, and I would urge you, don't throw it away, don't put it at risk with Ed Miliband as Prime Minister propped up by the SNP. That will be the worst choice for this country. It's the most important election for generation, don't put success at risk, don't put the economy at risk.
This is a privilege for me, a man of 83 years of age. I will be 84 years of age on 17th of May.
Sit down.
As I said before, I'm a self-made man. I printed 15,000 of these leaflets to introduce myself, and personally I distributed these 15,000 door to door myself. From 7 o'clock in the morning, when all of you are asleep, to 11 o'clock at night, when some of you are asleep. I have supported of all the people in my constituency. I am sure they will be loyal to me, because everybody who passes my shop, they say, we vote for you because you are a very smart businessman. So, I hope I haven't taken your time too much, and I haven't boasted about myself. If you can, vote for me. Let me go there. I will show you what I will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is an election with huge consequences. If Labour wins, millions of people will lead better lives. Families will have the security of a roof over their head. Now, I've lost count since I've been a councillor of the number of families who come to me saying, my private landlord is kicking me out. Why is he kicking you out? Because he can take in new tenants who will pay more rent. Therefore, family with 5 children kicked out, nowhere to go, one will probably end up moving them out of the borough. This is being repeated again and again and again in our borough, and it needs to stop. Labour has a plan to stop that with rent stabilisation and making sure that new tenants are aware of previous rent takeover. That might sound really technical and boring and unexciting, but think of those families who are actually being kicked out of London boroughs on an industrial scale. 50,000 of them out of London boroughs since 2012. That's a direct consequence of some of the Tories' policies. Both my grandfathers fought in the Second World War, and they were proud signatories of Britain's all-inclusive welfare state. My parents grew up in new council homes built by the post-war government, and they enjoyed free education and good job prospects. Then there's my generation, whose work opportunities are limited and still living either with our families or in overcrowded shared accommodation. And my parents' generation, who are now having to juggle caring for their elderly relatives with their jobs. There's no room at the inn for them at home, because my generation is still kicking around being a pain in the back. But you have the power to change this. When I first took the plunge into politics, I didn't feel like I could make a difference. But I know that my actions since then have made a difference for people. And I know that collectively we can make even more difference. Things have changed in Chipping Barnet. There was a 4% gap between Labour and the Tories in the elections last year. In 1945, we collectively took the decision to turn our backs on poverty and exclusion, and elect me next week, and we can look forward to prosperity and inclusion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you agree with me. It's been fascinating evening. I would like, on your behalf, to thank all 6 candidates for everything. I would like to thank you and all those people who didn't quite make it at the start, and those people who arrived at 7:30 because the press got the time wrong, for coming tonight and making this such a fascinating evening. There are just 2 things I would ask of you. It is now 10 o'clock, which is when I asked the candidates to be prepared to stay to. If they are prepared to stay on, then I'm delighted. The one thing about this building is that if you go get a drink and stay there, we at the front won't get to it. So if you get a drink and then take yourself back away from the service area, that'd be great. And could I ask you, please, to stay in your seats until the candidates have made their way through you to their room. Let's thank them on their way out.